Okay, what we're going to talk about today is the economic situation here in the United States, as it is the current reigning empire of the world. The status of empire was, in the ancient world, defined as large geographical areas that were conquered over different peoples and then subjugated them to these enormous geographical spanses of what we call empires. Assyria, Persia, Greece, Rome, Egypt, Babylon, Medes, the list goes on. Not very much more, but a few more I can't remember entirely. But nonetheless, that's what an empire was defined as. During the period of the 1300s, right, they are attempting to get this trade route instead of going by land from India, bringing in goods and things to the European aristocracy that are just gaga over everything from India, but the merchants cannot do this because they've already hiked the prices up like so high that nobody can afford the goods, and the European aristocracy can never get enough of all the things that they're bringing. So they're making lots of money, but they just know if they could do this by water in boats that they could bring tons more and get, triple the amount of money that they could do over land. It takes way more time. They can't bring as much if they could just get the water shit right. Well, it took them almost 100 years during the 1300s all the way into the 1400s to figure out that there's a current system. Once they left Bombay, India, they are in the middle of the Indian Ocean. They know that they can't see any land in either direction, and they're afraid that they're going to fall off if they go anywhere outside. They can't see land. They might fall off the side of the world because it's flat. Still, they believed that at the time. So what they know that the next landmass that they should be seeing after maybe a couple of days in the Indian Ocean after leaving Bombay should be the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, right? And once they have eye contact with that, it's easy. They just follow the coast right up to the Red Sea and up to the Suez. They offload the goods onto new ships at the Mediterranean and then pull right into Venice or Milan on either side of the boot and deliver all their goods and services. What? Okay, right, like that. Well, it took 100 years to figure this thing out because every single time they are attempting to, they're not having ships. They did not yet have ships. They were boats, very small. And what would occur every single time, and they did not understand this, is they would leave Bombay in practice runs with these small boats, big enough to carry goods and services, but not, shipping wise. Okay, so they don't know that these current systems are engaged in the open seas, and that what's happening is every time they leave Bombay and they're in the Indian Ocean, they can't see land in any direction. Even they know they have to keep that rudder without moving it left or right, steady as she goes, and if they keep it in place, they know that they will eventually make eye contact with the Arabian Peninsula, and then they'll be on the right track, and they know how to get from there to the next. But what is occurring without even their rudder is being held in place, so it shouldn't be changing the direction at all. But because of the current systems that run in the Indian Ocean is circling this way, they always end up in the Persian Gulf. They know where they're at. It's just not where they need to be, no matter they're holding the rudder or not. And the reason is because the boat is down as it leaves India, but once it jumps into the current system, it raises it up instantly and starts just riding along the current system and driving it. Because the rudder is not a big, huge rudder, it's a boat, not a ship, then holding it in place won't do you any good because it doesn't matter. That current system is just going to drag you wherever it takes you, holding the rudder, or otherwise it's not going to be enough. You need a bigger rudder that's going to go much deeper because once you're in the current system, the boat will rise up, and now the rudder has to be much larger to keep that in place. Well, it took almost 100 years for them to figure this out, because they kept landing. They knew where they were landing at. They knew where they were at. in what's present-day Iran, but in this case it was Persia at the time. But it isn't where they want to be. So they continued to do this, and eventually they figured this out. They're in this current system, so they started building new and bigger ships started to be built. And so the idea and the definition of empire status gets changed from what was once considered empires were large geographical masses that were conquered over peoples and wielding their authority in that regard. And once ships became the new thing during the 1400s, the definition changed to any nation state that rules the seas and the oceans is considered the empire of the world. Okay, so as the modern empires are, and this is connected to what's happening here today, when you listen to this, as I'm going to explain this, in the modern empires, since the Spanish was the first empire of the modern era, it began in 1492 and it was ended in 1603 with the defeat of England. Elizabeth I defeated the Spanish Armada. Now, what are our leaders here in Washington doing every single day, all the time, going crazy about what? War. Why? War this, war with Russia, North Korea, Syria. They don't care. It's just war, 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 war. Why? Because of the economic situation. It's so absolutely imploding at this point. They got to do this. This is exactly what every single one of these empires does. In the case of Spain, this was happening the same old way. They are the empire of the world, so they have the muscle to still wield. Now, the way it works, and the reason why they push and leap for war as the first option, is because wars involve money. Somebody's got to fund it. Their economy is collapsing. So it's not them that are going to fund it. Private equity will come into the Spain. It won't, fix the economic deprivation. It will stop it from getting worse while they initiate war and go in. They have the strong likelihood, because they still have the muscle, that they're going to win the conflict. So if they do, all things are great, and they can fix everything from that point forward once that private equity funds in. Now, if they lose, it's still okay. Their empire in the New World is going to go no matter what if they lose. They've lost the war and the conflict, but now the only thing that matters is protecting the throne of Spain, the aristocracy, and the ruling elites that wield their power and influence over the nation-state of the Iberian Peninsula known as Spain. That private equity that came in as a result of going into war, but even they lost, was enough to keep them in power, even though their people were going to have to suffer the consequences of the economic deprivation, but eventually they will be able to pull out of it, and such that is the case that they did over the course of the next 100 years or so. Well, this is exactly what's occurring right now here in America. Now let's demonstrate this and see how it works. Okay, and in Spain's case, it ended in 1603 by Elizabeth I, who defeated their armada. No more Spain Empire. Who's next? Not England. Holland next. They rise to power from 1603, ended in 1697. Same situation. Economic deprivation occurring from the tulip bulb, no less, on the mercantile exchange. It was a market exchange situation based on tulips, no less, that funded. It was not the primary funding mechanism of the Dutch Empire. But yeah, they did have quite, it was rather pretty big for a little teeny Holland, yeah. And it was the crisis of the tulip bulbs that imploded their economy. So, of course, they also need to leap for war as the first easiest option. Since they are the empire of the world, the likelihood is that they will win, and then they can fix their situation. If they lose, the throne will be protected, and all the same, they will lose their foreign empire. That's going to go no matter what. And again, like Spain, they'll fix the rest later, so much as the ruling elites and the monarchy can be protected, and such is the case it did. They initiated war with France. They lost. Again, now France takes the mantle of empire from 1697 to 1787. That moment was the French Revolution. It exploded in that year, 1787. Now, this is the end of an age, the age of enlightenment, and the end of an epoch also. And an epoch is characterized as what we would call maybe, I want to say the Dark Ages, all right? Because that would be an epoch, right? So there are two things that are occurring. The end of that epoch, called the Dark Ages, and the Age of Enlightenment. There are several ages that do occur. The Renaissance age occurred, and also the Age of Enlightenment also occurred during this particular epoch called the Middle Ages, okay? The catalyst that ended this age and epoch was the French Revolution itself. Now, this is not the end of the French Empire, though. They did have and possessed control of quite nearly almost the entire United States of America, only they did not colonize anything. It's just that they owned it all. In addition to that, almost everything in Canada, too. Again, nothing colonized, just that they owned it all. They had, intentions to, at some point, colonize it just the way the British did here with the colonies in America. They, too, were going to do the same thing, only they never did. Their blow-up revolution occurred in 1787, and then it goes for 88, 89, 91, 92, 93, 94, and all they did was chop off heads of every single person on the French aristocracy that was connected to the royals, priests, bishops, anything connected to the church, all dead. Every single one of them chopped everybody's heads off. Even their leader, Roseanne, comes in 1794 and says, "That's enough with the chopping off of heads. We got to get on with it." So they chopped his head off. Yes, these French, wow, were they ever, oh my. This Louis the 14th, the Louis, it's always been the Louis, the family of the Fleur. The Fleur family has always occupied the French throne. Same family forever. And the Louis this, Louis that, whatever. It's always been forever. And to this day, still, there is a king of France. He's Louis also. The Defoe family lives on. Yes, they do. And they have aristocracy and counts and all kind of peoples. And they got money. And they don't got no power no more. But yeah, they're still around. Well, anyways, in the case of France, they had the economic, capacity to wield influence and power, and the military might to back it up, and such is the reason why they considered them an empire. Even though they were not the absolute rulers of the oceans, nonetheless, they did have all of these other components, and we have to give that to them. So we go forward from the blow-up moment in 1787. So from 1697 to 1787 is less 10 years than almost, that's 90 fucking years. Exactly, almost to the Spain, same old way. It was 100 and what, from 1492, 1603, 1592 to 02, yeah. So 111 years for Spain, and at the blow-up revolution moment in 1787 for France equals 1697, 1797 less 10 is again 90 years, exactly same old way with Holland. Are you following the pattern here? They go into revolution. In this case, it's not yet an economic episode. This is an internal revolution. They do not lose their status as empire, because even though they are having an internal conflict within France itself, all the other nation states of Europe are not going to get involved with whatever the hell is going on inside France, because they still have a lot of economic capacity and a military that is backing up their revolution and making it happen. They went with the people and allowed this. They backed them up. That was why. So In 1694, after 7 years of this, they, of course, were so mad. You have to understand that these Louis, especially Louis XIV, he was so ugly. God, hideously ugly. At the Louvre Museum, it's a portrait. You can probably find it online. It was painted by Rembrandt, of course. Looks just like a photograph. So you know what the monster looks like. I mean, he was just hideously ugly. And he's famously known to have said, "I cannot bear to look upon the people's faces." And this was the reason why he built the Palace of Versailles. But honey, I went there. I lived in France. This is not a palace. It's a city of gold, yes. And it wasn't just for him and his queen. He had the whole aristocracy. All of them lived and did everything at Versailles. They didn't even bother to go to Paris. They have a big-ass palace in Paris called the Palace de Lafayette. But it's a museum today, but that's where the kings and queens always lived until Louis XIV came in and changed it and made a big palace of Versailles, and it's a city of gold. They claim it bankrupted the treasury of France just doing it, and believe me, I think it did. I mean, this motherfucker is unbelievable. It's just incredible to know that this hateful motherfucking evil motherfucker, just the tyrant of all tyrants, these people of France, the regular people, were worked like dogs and slaves. They lived on bread and water every day, had meat maybe 2 or 3 times a year at most. They would never have even known what sugar was. Sugar never even made it to the continent of Europe until the 14th century. So they wouldn't have missed this because they never ever would have known what it was in any case. Nobody was able to afford that except the elites and the aristocracy, so they wouldn't have missed the whole idea of sugar. They wouldn't have ever tried it. So forget about it. And maybe wine here and there, but this is how it was for quite nearly 100 years and even longer, because Louis XIV comes to power prior to the empire status that France, is come under after the Dutch Empire ends in 1697. France rises to empire status. And for that reason, but Louis XIV had already done the palace and been, over and then remained in power for 70 years until he died. And Louis XV comes in. He's better than Louis XIV, but he didn't reign for a very, very long time. And he didn't do, very much of anything to alleviate the suffering of his people. He just wasn't quite nearly as bad. And, Louis XVI was fat, ugly, and dumb. He was 18 years old, something like that, when he comes to power. And everyone in Europe knew that when Louis XV died and that ugly 17-year-old Louis XVI takes the throne, well, that's France is going to blow. Everyone knew it. It was so predictable, and it did. He comes to power and the throne, 86, 85, 84, 83, 80... I think 83, because we won the American Revolution in 81. It was done with the help of France. We had to have them back us up. These colonists could never have done that war by themselves. Are you kidding me? Against the British Army? Not even a possibility. We had to have help. And the empire of the world was France, and they will do anything if it's undermining England, and that is how it got done. Well, Louis XV was already on his deathbed and dying while Franklin was negotiating round the clock to get him on board with helping us do this revolution. We knew we had to do this very quickly and get France on board with everything. And he worked his ass off in trying to make that happen and did so. The only thing that Louis wouldn't agree to is the $4 million that he needed to supply for the funding. He renegotiated, Franklin did, to $2 million, and just that was enough. They got more later, but it was okay just to get it to do anything at all, because they were terrified that Louis XV was going to die soon before the war could be done here in America, in which case France was going to explode. They just all knew it, that Louis XVI is so dumb and young and stupid, he's just not going to be able to hang to power. They're going to go nuts in this country if that happens. And he made a prayer when he was anointed king in 1780, don't quote me, but I think it's 1783. We won the war here in 81. 2 years later, Louis XV dies. His son, Louis XVI, comes to power. And famously, he's said to have made a prayer that said, God, please bless us, for we rule too young. And my God, if he only knew the words that he spoke. Wow. Yes, he did rule too young. Indeed, he did. His wife, Marie Antoinette, did not say, let them eat cake. That is a made-up bullshit. Well, anyways, they did try to escape with their 3 children to her father, Austrian king. She comes from the Austrian-Hungary Empire. That's the daughter of the king of Austria. And so they were escaping, during the revolution in 1787. They tried to disguise themselves. They're on a race to Austria right at the border. She says, Father, I'm coming. And oh no, the French, they busted them before they could cross the border. Oh no, you have answers to do. You're back to Paris. No, you can't go. You're the king and the queen. We know. So they stuck them in the Palace de Lafayette in Paris and locked them in for like 6 years. They couldn't leave their children in them. And they got a new leader after the rest of you got his head chopped off. And he said, look, you guys have killed everybody. And oh my, the church was the other problem. They're taking it from the other side. The royals are taking all their money this way, working them to death, and then the church wants all their money too. So they killed all the priests, the bishops, the cardinals, everything to do with the church. Forget it. Knocked all the stained glass windows out of Notre Dame Cathedral, put donkey shit on the walls, put wild animals in, dressed a prostitute and put her on the altar and worshipped her as the goddess of reason. My God, they wore that holy thing out. They could not handle it. They were outraged. They just hated this fucking hateful church beyond belief. They couldn't handle nothing. Well, anyways, he tells them, look, you got the king and the queen and their children locked in the palace for 6 goddamn years. You gotta kill them too. They said, but what are we gonna do? We don't have how can we have a government? We don't have a king and a queen. He said, look, you already killed everybody. You ain't got no government. You gotta make that yourself, stupid. Now drag their butts out, kill them, and then get busy and make a new government. What the hell are you talking about? So they did, and chopped their heads off, and now they're dead, and it's over. 1794, right, done. Now they don't know what to do. Well, somebody shows up. Who? Napoleon, yes. Oh, wow, 1695, right around there. Don't quote me, but yes, about that. He shows up and says, well, I'm going to be your leader. I think it was later, 67, 98. Yeah, a little later, maybe 98, I think. Yeah. And he shows up and he says, I'm going to be your emperor. And they said, look, we don't have kings and queens anymore. What's an emperor? He said, no, it's different. I'm not a king, an emperor, same thing, but they don't know. So they didn't care anyway. They just had only one thing. Look, you can do what you want and be the emperor if you want to, because the military loved him anyways. He was a genius, and they backed him up all the time. So they said, okay, well, you can be the emperor, but you have to do something. What? You have to go kill that pope and just destroy the Vatican. He's like trying to negotiate. Telling them, no, we can't do that. Well, oh no, they're not going to hear none of that. Oh, you can't be the emperor. Then no, you have to go and kill him. That's it. Well, he finally relents and says, okay, God damn it. So he sends General Berthier to the Vatican. They put him in chains, dragged Pius I out, threw him in a prison in France, and left him. He died 2 months later. Oh my, there it is. The Bible says the beast had a deadly wound. Do the mathematical calculation from Daniel to Revelation. It equals 1799. That's the year that he died, the Pope. Deadly wound. There it is. He died 1799. That's the deadly wound. See, you have the whore who rides the beast, okay, with her filthy cup of fornication, offering it to the world. Whore who rides beast must be in control of beast, because man ride horse, because man control horse, otherwise man doesn't ride horse. Got it? So, woman, prostitute, whore, riding beast is what? Church. Period. That's the whore riding the beast. The beast itself is the system by which it operates. The Vatican itself. That's the beast, okay? The 10 heads of the beast with 7 crowns are the Holy Roman Empire, all 10 of the different countries that are connected to it, with 7 crowns, meaning 7 of the 10 nation states have kings or queens to them, but there's more, not just that. So the whore who rides the beast, even after it had the deadly wound, Pope dead, no more Vatican operational, deadly wound, no more operational, nothing, but the whore is still there in the local churches of Spain and Italy, and, well, it wasn't Italy at the time, but the Papal States, this whole area, okay, yes, not in France, outlawed, yes, Holland, little places in those areas, Eastern Europe and places still Catholic, but, you know, England at that time, no, it's all Protestant now, and Germany was not yet a country, but still all Protestant there, and Switzerland also. So, yeah, but the southern countries were still all Catholic in the localities, and even in the New World, yes, Catholics all over the place, from Mexico into South America. Okay, so, anyways, so she's still operational because she is the church, right? The whore. She's the mother of harlots. So she has daughters that must be prostitutes too. Who are they? Well, the Protestant religions, quite obviously. The Episcopalians, the Baptists, the Methodists. Oh, wow. How many, God knows, Protestant religions do we have? Well, guess what? They're all prostitutes, just the same old way the mother is. Mother of harlots, so her daughter are harlots too. Why? Because they're all corrupt now. Every single one of these religions on the whole planet, including Christianity, all of them, are trash and filth. Flush them down the commode. They are social constructs, nothing more, nothing less, for many different reasons, but they are not, do not matter at all in any way. Okay, we can talk about those things in another video, but this is not the point right now. We're talking about something else. Let's illustrate that at a different time. Going forward, so I just wanted to denote that deadly wound that the Bible talks about, when it occurred, how and why. We can get all into, you know, how it resurrected, when it became this, that, the other, and the 7 heads, 7 crowns on the heads, and what it implies in today's world. Okay, all of that. We'll get back to it, how everybody worships after the beast once it's healed, etc., etc. Okay, but anyway, sticking with the topic at hand, if I can manage to do it. Okay, Napoleon shows up. He does this. Now they're happy, and they're going to let him. You know, they're still considered the empire of the world, even though it's not, you know, ruling the oceans. It's just that they have the military muscle and an economy that's still functioning, even during the revolution, and unbelievably enough as it may seem. Their government is non-operational, but the economy is all the same, and they still have the military muscle to wield its influence in any direction that they want. And no other nation in Europe is willing to get involved with whatever is happening in France. They just are not going to go. They're just going to stay the fuck away from whatever madness is happening, and that's all they're going to do. Well, after Napoleon does, you know, whatever they asked him to do, and another famous portrait in the Louvre, it goes over the whole goddamn wall. It's like 16 feet length, and it from floor to ceiling high. It is a Rembrandt, again, like a photograph. Unbelievable. This picture tells 1,000 words. It's got Napoleon like this with a crown right above his head, just about to set it down. Why is that important? Because every king and queen from the year Christmas Day, 800 AD, Charlemagne, first king ever in the history of Europe, crowned by the Pope and his hand alone, crowned every king or queen that ever was in all of the history of Europe, from the very beginning, even to today, Elizabeth II and Beatrix of Holland, both of them queens, with crowns on their head by the hand of a pope that did it. There has been yet and only one individual in all of history of Europe that did not have a pope put the crown on his head, and that was Napoleon. Such is the reason his hands got the crown over his head. He has to crown himself because there was no pope to do it for him, and he's going to be the emperor of France. And there it is in the picture with all the regalia and everything. It's just amazing. The portrait is just in your face, showing you, look at me. I, the one and only Napoleon, am Emperor of France by my own hand, because I killed the Pope and he cannot do it for me. There is none. And he's the only one in all of history, from way back when it began all the way through, even to this very day. Yes, the only one. And that Pope can put a crown on your head and he can take it away too. One of the most famous incidents of that happening was the panic of well, there was a Germanic prince, I believe, in the middle of wintertime, who had this big argument with one of the popes. I can't even remember the year. It's a very famous story. You may actually know about it. And the Pope excommunicates him and removes his crown by decree. So, in an effort to regain his favor, he travels to the Vatican in the middle of winter in barefooted snow, banging at the door, pleading for the Pope to have an audience with him for 3 days straight in the freezing cold. Nearly died to do this. Unbelievable. And the Pope just simply would not. And 3 days later he does. He goes in and kisses his feet and pledges his allegiance, and he's so sorry. Please, please reinstate me as the king of this whatever the hell locality it was. I don't know if it was in Scandinavia or Germany somewhere, but nonetheless it was one of them. I'm so embarrassed that I don't remember the actual name of the incident. It's called the incident of something something. And yeah, and it's very famous, and he finally does get him, to do that, and the humiliation of that, or whatever the hell, that's the name of it. And it just goes to illustrate the power of what this institution and the Pope himself has always wielded all along and still does to this very day. I mean, if you think that man, any of them, since especially, and not just during the Middle Ages when they had absolute authority, but even after it resurrected itself after the Latvian Treaty from Pius XI going forward, the 8 kings, that's connected to the 7 crowns on the beast's head, because the Bible says that there will be 8 kings, but only 7 of the kings have crowns, because the 8th will be of the 7. Okay, so there's another clue as to the crowns and when and how did they become crowned. Popes are popes. They're a religious system, yes? But it changed during the Latvian Treaty in 1929 with Mussolini, which was negotiated by Pius XII before he became Pius XII under Pius XI. It was Pius XII prior, before he became Pius XII. He worked as papal legate to Pius XI and negotiated the Latvian Treaty, which states that the Vatican is a separate city-state, nation-state in and of itself, can issue its own money, passports, currency, I guess, stamps, have a mail. 150 goddamn anchors, a walled-up city right outside of Rome. That's it. But it has all diplomatic immunity. It has a seat at the UN. It is a nation-state, temporal power in every single way. And the sovereign nation-state of the Vatican is sovereign by reason of the fact that it has a king called the Pope. For the first time in 1929, the popes themselves are now considered kings. They have crowns of a triple crown: the spiritual, temporal, and sovereign state. King of such the Church of the Universal Catholic religious practice, and the city-state beast system of the Vatican itself. So Pius XI is crown 1, Pius XII crown 2, John the 23rd crown 3, Paul VI crown 4, John Paul I 5, John Paul II 6, Ratzinger is 7, and Francis I is 8, but there are 7 crowns, not 8. Because of the 7, the 8th will be of the 7. Which one of the 7 will the 8th be? Well, I don't know, but I think it's John Paul II. We can get into that later. Back to the lecture at hand. We're talking about the economic deprivations and how it works in each and every one of these cases, and why it is that you need to be aware of the fact that what is occurring currently right now in this country, so cleverly manipulated and hidden from your understanding and veiled so carefully through the manipulation of the markets and checking the numbers, this, that, the other, and how the United States of America has no particular special decree to wield its power and influence and its prosperity any more than Spain, Holland, France. We'll go forward. We haven't finished with France yet. They all were great empires themselves that were collapsing economically. They initiate war, just like our leaders are trying to do for us, to fix this economic situation, thinking that we're going to win the conflict. There will be a war. It's happening as we speak. It's going to get bigger, and we're going to lose, just like in every one of these cases. I'm telling you how it happened. Okay, back to Napoleon. He starts after the Pope is dead. He goes forward with his wars, and he definitely is a military genius. He wipes the asses of every single country on the continent, like in lightning speed, just devastates them, one by one by one by one. He does not kill the monarchs, the kings and the queens and the aristocracy. He leaves them alone. He litters the continent, clogs it with shit. And he's trying to make an empire, but all he knows how to do is to whip ass, obliterate their military apparatus, and that's it. Then he's leaving, and he don't care. He tells the king and the queen of Austria, "You collect taxes and send it back to France. I'm busy. I gotta go kick ass." So the French are now being, again, bled dry, bankrupting themselves, selling off their territory to Jefferson, the Louisiana Purchase, for $4 million. We didn't have it. He had a couple million, and so we sent that and said, we'll pay you later, but we never ever did. Napoleon was fine with the couple million that he got. It was funding enough. Then he sold off the territories in Canada for more money to fund more wars. Well, the French were fed up in 1813 or 1812 or 13, somewhere around there, and they said, listen, when he went to Russia, he actually was the only one in history that ever did make it got to Moscow. Even Catherine the Great, Ivan the Terrible, fucking the Czars, the Bolshevik Revolution, okay, every single one of these, nobody in the history ever has been successfully capable of defeating Russia. But it's not because they're good fighters. It's always a war of attrition. They will just keep coming and coming and coming and coming, and you can't kill them fast enough. And if you don't get on the move to start your invasion at the very first of the spring dew on the ground, you'll never ever get it done, because by the time you get to Moscow, if you even get there, it'll already be fall, and you're going to be stuck. And that's exactly what happened to Napoleon, the one and only one individual that actually did get it all done, got into Moscow, had it under his control, but stuck because it's winter. Now he cannot leave. He entered with 950,000 troops, and he waited for the spring to come. He couldn't leave because everything's clogged, the muddy roads. He could not move his armies. They were all dying. Wow. During his tenure, as he's, waiting for the spring to come back so he can get the hell out, because he realized it wasn't a good idea. He's being fucked behind this. All these monarchs who he had left alone and did not kill, the aristocracy and the monarchs of the other nation states, he just whipped their armies to death. But he left them in power and still in charge. They had a secret conference together, even the French themselves. Once Napoleon had returned from Russia, they already knew that it was going to be a disaster when he came back, because he never ever did make an empire. He just whipped ass very well and obliterates all their military apparatus, but leaves all them in power and tells them that they're going to have to do it for him, like they're going to. Well, now the French are fed up with him too, because he's bleeding them dry and not making an empire at all. He's just doing what he's doing, and they cannot deal with it. So they secretly got together and said, look, when he gets back, we're going to put him on an island off the coast of Italy. And we'll draw up a contract and tell him he can be emperor of the island. We'll pay him money for he can have visitors and all that, but he has to stay. And that's what we're going to do. And the reason that they were so, genteel is, well, it's a couple reasons. One is because we're just at the end of the Age of Enlightenment, so it's kind of like it's the right thing to do. But most especially, it's not that. It has more to do with the fact that when he whips these other, nation states apparatus, military apparatus, he leaves the ruling monarchs and aristocracy alone. He doesn't kill them. And so they felt like, well, we can't kill him either in that case. We'll just put him on an island because he didn't do it to us. Well, 2 years after he's on this island, he escapes in 1814 to the Alps, raises a new army, marches back into Paris and says, I'm back. And the French are like, no, you're not. You're on an island. What are you talking about? Well, the military backed him up, put guns in their faces and said, oh, yes, it is, because they loved him. And, he says, well, they're like, well, who are you going to fight? There's nobody left. Well, England, what do you think? Well, no, you can't go there. You know that. Nobody in history has ever, ever, ever been able to do that. Why? Because you cannot move a ship with army peoples on it at the Dover Cliffs, because that's like a 40-foot skyscraper when you get there. So how are you going to get up to the land? You can't. So the only other option is you have to go either up the west side of the island or the east side of the island. Either direction, you've got to move these ships close, because if you don't run on the east side of the island up that way, if you get too far away, you'll be in the current system of the Arctic Ocean, and it'll take you around to the other direction, and it won't make it. If you're on the west side of the island going up, you have to be close enough to the island, because Ireland is in between, so you got to be close enough. And the British will, of course, see the ships on the move in any direction. They're going to have cannons waiting. They're going to blow up every single ship before it gets to either Liverpool or Birmingham, one or the other. They got to port in there, offload their troops and their things to get established onto the island of England, and never once in all of history has it ever occurred because of that reason. The British will just simply wait for the ships to be on the move, and as soon as they show up, they'll blast them all out of the water. They'll never make it to port. So nobody ever has done it. The only person that ever did try was not through the Navy. It was Hitler with his Air Force, and even that wasn't able enough to do it. None. So none of the nation states on the continent of Europe ever would have imagined that Wellington would agree to come and meet him at Waterloo. He demanded Wellington come and have a battle with him at Waterloo in Holland on that battlefield, because Napoleon already understands he does not have the option to go there, to England. He can't do it. So he cannot do that. So the whole of Europe thought to themselves, well, Wellington's never going to agree to this. They don't have to do that. And he knows he's going to get his ass whipped, so why in the hell would he do it? He doesn't have no reason to come over there and fight him at Waterloo. He can just stay where he's at. He knows Napoleon ain't going to go there. So they don't got to fight nobody if you don't want to. Well, amazingly, surprise to surprise, Wellington agrees to do this. Everybody in Europe is thinking, is he nuts? This guy's got to be out of his mind. What is he talking about? Well, Wellington had a secret that Napoleon didn't know about, and I don't know the name of it, but what it is, see, in those days, in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, which would be the, 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, even in the 15, some of which the 1500s, late 1500s, going forward into the 1800s, right? All this period of time. Warfare is, I don't know how you would kind of like describe it and to articulate it, but it has some degree of like, I don't know, they were like very, gentlemanly like, I suppose. In other words, once they communicated that he had agreed to come to meet him at Waterloo and have a battle, they signed documents with each other to correspond that, okay, I'm going to arrive with my ships, my men, my supplies, and everything on such and such date. Napoleon gets the message, and so he's there at Waterloo with his troops. They're not going to fight them when they arrive. He's going to allow them to port in, offload his troops, set up his camps, whatever the hell he's got to do. They're not going to shoot. Nobody's going to get fighting, and not at all. They agreed to a different day, 2 days later, that the battle would start. So he's going to allow them to do all that they need to do to get set up and everything on the battlefield. Nobody's going to fight nobody until the 2-day period is up. Then when the sun rises on the 3rd day, they're going to start fighting. So they do. Well, Napoleon's like he doesn't understand what's happening, because what he sees is something he's never seen before. And I don't know the name of this, but what it is Wellington is setting up these circle things all dotted all over the battlefield of Waterloo. And in these circles, you can have maybe like 15 to 20 men, all of which have musket rifles, right? And they're like this, pegged out in the circle with planks that have like sharp points on the end going outward. So the men inside the little circle thing, they're protected, but their guns can point in all directions out anywhere in the circle. So Napoleon is confronted with this thing. Never ever has he seen this before. Even his genius military maneuvers are of no use, because he's doing this, that, the other, turning this way, that way, the other, but it doesn't work. These guys are protected inside these little round circle things. They're not getting picked off, but they're picking off the French left and right. Every time he's moving this way, that way, it doesn't matter. They're just picking them off like nothing. And they're not getting picked off in any way, because he doesn't have the ability to penetrate this little circle thing, while their muskets are being able to like point through all locations in the whole circle. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it changed military strategy like forever more going forward. But we've, of course, modernized into this new age where this is irrelevant at this point. But nonetheless, it changed warfare at that point. It definitely had impact on our Civil War here in America, even though that wasn't something that was widely used. It was definitely something that was used to improve with military strategy. People like General Lee and probably even Grant would definitely have known about this stuff, because it was only a few years after which that our Civil War did happen. Well, we're talking 1815 Battle of Waterloo, so 1820, 30, 40, 50, 60, 45 years later, our Civil War would begin. So they definitely would have known very much all about it. Now, he loses, unbelievably enough as it may seem. Now, here's the other kicker on the Waterloo event. You know, the Rothschild banking family are the wealthiest family on the planet. They have 1/2 of the entire GDP on the entire planet. That is the amount of money that they are worth. Now, how did they gain so much money? 1/2 of the entire wealth of the planet, this one family controls. Oh, yes. I can't even know what the number is, the real number. I don't even think they could. But it happened because of Waterloo. Why? Amstel Rothschild had 5 sons. 5 sons. He was a banker, and his 5 sons set up banks in Paris, Munich, London, Milan, and Vienna. All 5 cities. Every single one of these sons, each of them ran a bank in all these major cities, okay? At that time. Now, they're already a powerful banking family because of that reason. Since Napoleon was already the foregone conclusion to be the winner of this battle, and at the British Exchange, which is like the New York markets are today. At that time, it was located. It still is the British Mercantile Exchange to this very day. Only it was the biggest that there was at the time, and so it's still called the Mercantile Exchange. It's not exactly the same as the market system that we understand today, but it's basically the same thing. In any case, it is speculating, and it's market, paper markets and stuff like that. Commodities and other things too, but nonetheless, their plan, these Rothschilds and Amstel Rothschild and his sons, they have their agents there at the scene at Waterloo. Okay, because of Napoleon's madness, going around everywhere, littering the continent and just clogging everything up, there is no possibility to go from Calais across the channel and over to England like you would normally be able to do it, and it take like 30 minutes. In this case, because everything's fucked and Napoleon's blocked, this and that, you can do the trip over there to England, but you got to go south of Calais and leave somewhere around Deauville, okay, is the Brittany province, or you could go north into Antwerp and leave from that location across to London in that case. Either way, because Waterloo is in between the two. So in any case, in order to get over to England, if that's what your objective is to do, you got to ride a horse down to Brittany or up to Antwerp and then take a boat. It'll take more than 30 minutes, but probably not very much more, maybe 45 minutes, hour at most in either case. They chose to go to Brittany in the case of the Rothschilds, and the plan was, as the conflict began and they had agents on the scene watching this thing, it became increasingly obvious from the very beginning to these Rothschild agents that this battle was definitely going to be won by the British Wellington, and Napoleon was going to lose this thing. But this was not at all what the rest of the European continent believed. They were sure that Napoleon would win. So the idea that the Rothschilds had is, since their agents were there already and had the very real understanding that this conflict was going to be won by England, they're going to send an agent on horseback down to Brittany and then cross over to England in less than an hour, deliver the news, the fake news, to the Mercantile Exchange that Napoleon did in fact win the conflict well before Wellington can get back to England, because it is not yet ended, it's just begun, but they're operating on the assumption that Napoleon is going to lose. So they tell this information as though it's already done, and what happens is the Mercantile Exchange collapses as a result of this news, and that's what occurred. Immediately upon that happening, the battle did in fact end, so they buy up pennies on the dollar every single thing on this exchange, which is basically the entire world's, well, not Asia, but everything else that ever could be in 1815 that was in a market exchange at all was done there. That family bought it all up for pennies on the dollar. Wellington returns the next day in victory and announces the fact that he won instead, and all of which now the Rothschilds possess all things. They own everything. Like literally, they owned the whole of the British island. Even basically, they still do, and the Mercantile Exchange and every single thing else they could imagine. Because now, when Wellington reports the real information that he did win, all of the pennies on the dollar that the Rothschilds bought up now skyrocket back to the normal prices, even above. But now they possess everything and they own it all. So that's where all their super wealth money came from this one battle there, where they just gambled on the assumption that if they delivered fake news to the mercantile exchange, that it would collapse the market. They could buy it up pennies on the dollar, and then when the real news came, they would all be super billionaires instantaneously, and that is exactly what occurred. Very clever indeed, huh? These Jews, unbelievable. I don't think that, but anyway. Yeah, that's what happened. So let's get this done with France, right? Finally. So 1787 is the French Revolution moment. It goes 6 more years of chopping heads, nothing but. Then the Pope is murdered in 1799. Well, he dies in prison, so he's dead. The deadly wound happens. Then Napoleon continues until 1815. He loses in 1815 at Waterloo. Again, they collectively get together. They don't kill him. They put him on another island. This time it's off the coast of Africa. He gets to be the emperor of Africa, gets money. He can have visitors, but he can never leave. And he does stay there, and he dies eventually on that island, and that is his life, and it's over. I don't know when, sometime in the late 1800s, yes, but he never did leave. Okay, finally, they put him far away, so he couldn't. But nonetheless, and again, the reason was because he didn't kill them, so they felt like, that they couldn't kill him either, and it was just like, that was it. So, well, anyways, so if you can put Napoleon into the factor and the revolution, alone up to from 1697 until 1787, it's 90 years would be the Empire of France. But you have to include the 6 years of chopping heads, plus 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, another 4 years before Napoleon comes in, then begins in 1799 to 1815. Okay, so it's 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, plus more years. That is exactly 90 to 110 years. Okay, pattern. Watch it. Spain equals 1492, 1592, 02. It's 110 years, 111 years. Spanish. Dutch, 90 years almost exactly. Okay. France, 110 years, almost just that. At 1815, they're over. No more French Empire. It's dead. It's completely done. Okay, no more power, no more military, nothing. The economy's completely over, imploded. It's just finished, and they have no more territory to colonize. Even if they did or could, they've already sold it off, and so it's over. It's just finished. Again, we're working on time periods of approximately 100 years in each of these cases. Okay, let's move to the next. England rises up to be the next empire from 1815 until 1914, exactly 99 years. Wow, unbelievable. What happened? World War I. In the case of England, their empire was in the biggest of all of these empires. They quite nearly took the entire world. They pulled their ships up into every single country that is in Africa, except North Africa, Kenya, and pretty much that's it. All the other countries, Gabon, Congo, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Tanzania, Somalia, Ethiopia was its own country, different. And Egypt and North Africa also different. No. West Guyana, Nigeria, yeah, every one of these countries, forget it. These are just lines on a map that the British drew to make nation states out of the massive continent of Africa. They have controlled it ever since the 18th century, and even to this day, every one of these countries is ruled by a junta government. A junta government is what the British put into place when they had to leave Africa, India, Australia, and everywhere else they were in the world, controlling all things in Afghanistan. They owned it all. They just pulled their ships up, hung flags, and said, "Give me all your shit or you're dead." And they shipped it all back to England. And when World War I happened, they had to run back to little England to save her. But when they left, and all of the Middle East also, they left for World War I. Now, oil had already been discovered in 1903. So it's a huge commodity. When they pulled out of Africa, the Middle East, India, okay, well, India was the subcontinent. It's already, a, a nation state. When they left, it was just intact. And so basically, Afghanistan was too, but it was partitioned. But the Middle East, there were no countries, okay? They just drew lines on the map and made new little countries of this, that, the other. And the little Kuwait that's carved out of the country known as Iraq was just a little teeny line, little teeny thing, because Dutch Royal Shell Oil Company, that's the Holland, the throne of Holland, where all their money comes from, located right there, and BP British Petroleum, also in Kuwait, the second largest oil producer on the planet. And both of them are the source of the revenue in even more they have coming in. They don't manufacture anything in England, and it's still an incredibly wealthy nation. Depends on who it is that we're talking about that owns all this wealth. Because there is no distinction about the fact that they have all of these, the Kuwait oil fields belong to them. So when they pulled out during World War One, raced back to Little England to save her, they did that. They partitioned all the maps and made lines in the maps in new countries and blah 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 blah. Put junta governments in the Middle East, because now oil is now a big deal and the major source of energy on the planet. So in all these different Middle Eastern countries, they're supplying oil because they're finding it everywhere, all over the place. Their populations began to start exploding in places like Iran, not in Saudi Arabia, but Iraq, Iran, the little emirates. No, they're just little tiny emirates like Bahrain, Qatar, Yemen, not oil producing nation really. You have also little Israel, not an oil producer, but will be very soon because they just found some. Egypt, not very much. Libya, lots. Used to be, anyway. Turkey, no. Syria, yes. Iraq, oh, yes, definitely. Jordan, not much. But nonetheless, okay, so they set up junta governments, but then autocratic dictators took over power in all the different regimes of the Middle East eventually later on. But in Africa, a totally different story. They did the same thing when they pulled out of Africa during World War One, draw maps, lines in the sand for this country, that, and named the countries, set up junta governments in every single one of these locations, with the exception of Kenya, North Africa, Ethiopia, and South Africa. All the rest of the entire continent was junta governments in every single one of these little. If you look at the map of Africa and the nation states that are this little one here, this little one here, you can understand the reasons behind why the lines are drawn in this particular way and why the Congo is so big. Nigeria is over here really big. Tanzania is just this little part. Zimbabwe is this little part right down here. Gabon is over here, little teeny things. Sierra Leone is this little thing over here. Why? Why is it that little teeny countries over here on the west side of Africa, the middle of Africa, huge, enormous blocks of land? This sub-Sahara Africa on the east side is like, you have Kenya, then you have Somalia. Somalia and Ethiopia different, though. Sudan also different. But down in Tanzania and Zimbabwe and places like this, okay, why are the maps in the countries looking like they do? Because it doesn't make any sense. They're not natural boundaries, like, say, in Europe. You can see natural boundaries, like the Pyrenees Mountains separates France from the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal. Okay, easy. That's the boundary. How do you boundaries France from not just the Iberian Peninsula in the south, but then you have the Mediterranean Ocean for the south. You have the Alps to separate it from Italy and Switzerland. In the north, you have the Ardennes Forest that separates it from Germany and Holland. So natural barriers there. The peninsula of Italy, it's a boot, just one peninsula. There it is. That's easy. How Holland and the Netherlands are one huge, massive river in between the two low countries. Natural barrier there. You have the Danube River that runs through Germany. You have the Rhineland that's been connected to East Germany. Massive. It never was a country until the 18th century, in fact, because it's the largest country in all of Europe, but it was never its own country. It was always, because it's nothing but mountains, hills, trees, and forests all over the goddamn place in Germany, and it's not homogenized in any particular way. It became so because at some point during the 18th century, they shared the common tongue, language, and cultural ideas and bloodlines, and so they eventually became their own country. Switzerland, okay, you have the Alps surrounding the entire little teeny Switzerland. That's a natural barrier there. Austria-Hungary, you have rivers that make the natural boundaries for it. Poland, Czechoslovakia, okay, all of these natural boundaries. England is an island, that's easy. Ireland is an island. Okay, right, so it all makes sense. But you look at the African map, there's nothing of anything like that. These countries and lines on the maps are drawn for different reasons. The British are making little tiny countries in very specific ways that are tribal in nature. That's why Gabon and Sierra Leone and they're little countries in West Africa, but they're separate and very distinct one to the other because they're tribal. And this is why the lines on the maps and the countries are designed in this particular way, because the homogenized groups that live in the particular locations will be, culturally and, culturally identified with one another, tribally speaking. And that is the case for almost the entire continent. And the reason it's so important that the British did make these countries and set up the junta governments is because England had figured out that the mass of amounts of natural resources, deposits of gold, emeralds, precious stones, silver, every natural mineral you could ever think of is located on the continent of Africa more than any other place on earth. This continent of Africa has every single thing, everything, and more. And they want it all. And they've had it all since the 18th century and even to this day. And a junta government obeys the crown of England like all junta governments. They must, or else they get agitated and thrown out of power, and they'll find somebody else that can live like a king in a lap of luxury as long as they starve their people to death, send all their fucking goods and whatever they have, their gold, their silver, whatever they want, send it back to little England and do your good job, and you can live like a king, but starve your people and don't feed them and send us your shit. And then if you fuck up and you do what we're telling you, we're going to send in people to agitate a rebellion, overthrow you, and put somebody else into power, and you'll be no more kings and queens, or like ruling elites in the country. And since all these countries are deathly poor and have nothing at all, they're going to keep their power easily enough by just obeying the crown of England. Many times they haven't, and the English just send in agitators to overthrow that regime, and they put in place somebody else that will do. And that's why you have starving people in Africa all over the place. Not because there's not enough food. I live there. There's plenty of food on the goddamn continent of Africa. Are you kidding me? There's plenty of food for everybody. There's no reason in the world, none, that you have starving people all over the place in Africa. There is no reason in the world for it except the hateful British that want it that way. They just hate them. That's all. Get over it. What are you going to do? Go kill the queen? It's just the way the world is. It's a hateful, evil fuck. So, I don't know. I feel bad for them. I do. I feel bad for the world right now because it's really, really going bananas. The whole damn planet, which is unlike any other time period or age or epoch or anything that this world has ever known. Even the French Revolution. This was the biggest event in modern history. There is nothing that can compare with that revolution in 1787 that we call the French Revolution. It was the end of an age, the Age of Enlightenment, also the end of an epoch, the Middle Ages. It ended at that catalytic moment, and then it geopolitically shifted the entire planet in less than 100 years. It toppled every monarchy on the continent of Europe, just as Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati had originally planned. That was the plan. First, the American Revolution must happen first. Get France to help you do it. They did. Then France blew up and turned it into a secular nation. It did. All the other thrones of Europe fell like dominoes, replaced them all with secular governments. The intention was to kill the Vatican too. Well, they were dead, but he resurrected and came back in, so the plan for the Illuminati had to be adjusted to the new reality that the Pope and the Vatican are not going away, they're going to remain. So they just went along with it and adjusted it. The only reason that Holland has Beatrix doesn't have any real power. She's just the Queen of Holland, and she has lots of money. But she doesn't have any real power anymore. But she has a palace and money and all that. The Queen Bitch England #2, Elizabeth, she does have power still, because that's a constitutional monarchy. That's the only reason she still has her crown and her throne and her palace, because her job is anything and everything that has to do with international anything. She's briefed every single day by the Prime Minister for, I don't know, an hour and a half. He's got to go report at like 9 a.m. to the Queen Bitch and tell her every detail of every single thing, that's going on externally, internationally, whatever decisions that are going to be made. She's got to make those choices. That is her power. The constitutional monarchy that's the way it works. Their parliamentarian system is the other half, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, which rule all things internally on England itself. Taxation, this, that, the other, anything at all that has to do with the people's representation of the island of England for themselves. That power lies in the representative government of their parliament. Nothing at all to do with foreign relations. Not entirely. They do have some degree of, the Queen basically makes those decisions, but not in every single situation. It does involve, and especially like during the last coalition of the willing, the first and the last of the Iraq First War and the Second Iraq War, the British Parliament itself had voted, the Queen already had made her intentions that she was going to do it no matter what. But for whatever reason, maybe, I don't know, it's possible that there have been other changes to the English legal representation body and how it operates, because they definitely had passed a voting amendment to participate in these conflicts. But nonetheless, yes, so that's why she's still there and around, because that's her power. So anyway, so we go there from 1815 until 1914. Again, there's a 99-year period, and World War I is the reason why they had to pull out from all the locations. They set up junta governments in all the different places. But then the Middle East, of course, became overrun by autocratic dictators because of the oil money coming in. Africa never did get out of their situations, because the junta governments simply get overthrown and replaced whenever they don't obey. And so they're still under the crown of England, being ruled by them. India, of course, is independent completely now after Gandhi. Australia also independent, but a commonwealth of the British Crown. It doesn't mean that Australia doesn't have its own government. Yes, they definitely do. But it just means that ceremonially they are a commonwealth of England. Afghanistan, of course, is independent, but it's pretty much a theocracy that is heroin and rare earth minerals like zinc and lithium ion that makes batteries and whatnot. Well, the United States took possession of all this stuff. It's the largest deposit in the world. It's located in Afghanistan, and then we sold it to China. So they now possess it. Why we did that, I cannot know. But we still have possession of the poppy fields and run the drug trade called the Golden Triangle, the heroin trade on the whole, pretty much it's all being done by the U.S. government itself. That's why you have an enormous heroin epidemic all over the country, from Washington State, Oregon to New Hampshire, Maryland. It's heroin epidemics all over the place ever since they've been in command and control of Afghanistan for 13 fucking years, shipping the goddamn drugs into this country to melt it. Yes, it's very, very easy. I mean, shit, the government's been doing this for fucking ever. George Bush 1, when he was CIA director, started moving cocaine from Colombia into Panama, where it was processed, and Manuel Noriega shipped it to Governor Clinton in Arkansas at Mena Airport, and then distributed it all over the country. And then when crack became the big thing, George Bush 1 told Manuel Noriega, you got to fix this shit into crack and then send it to Arkansas so Clinton can distribute it that way. And Noriega said, no, you got to pay me more money. That's more work. And Bush 1 said, no way. You either do it or I'm coming to get you. So Manuel Noriega, he refused. And so what happened? George Bush 1 sent in helicopters in to go and find the bitch. And so what did Noriega do? He ran. Where did he go? There's only one option in this case. If the United States government is going to come get your butt, it's illegal against international law. We can't do that, but he ain't going to stop. Nobody's going to stop us because we are the biggest one on the planet. Ain't nobody going to stop us if we want to do it. The helicopters went there. Well, where can he go? The church. Yeah. He's got to call that goddamn Pope because he's the only motherfucker that can get him out of this situation. The helicopters were hovering right above the goddamn church in Panama City. They knew he was inside there because they know he's got to call that Pope. He's going to get in contact with him, and George Bush 1 has got to wait. That's why the helicopters were hovering above the church for 3 goddamn hours. They just hovered there waiting. And then eventually, after 3 hours, they landed, and they went in. They drug his butt out, put him on a helicopter, and flew him to Miami, threw him in a jail cell. 20 years later, they let him out. They just let him out a couple years ago. He was 20 years locked up for no reason at all, just because he would not do the drug thing. And he had been doing it all along, but wanted more money. Yeah. Well, evidently, he did get in contact with the Pope, and then, of course, the Pope called George Bush 1 and said, go get him, I don't care. Because if he had said no, then those helicopters would not have taken his butt out. If that Pope told him no, you can't do it, then he would have been fine. He just was gambling with, taking a chance because that's the only option that he did have. And if that Pope had told him, don't worry about it, nobody's going to come and get you, well, he would have called George Bush 1 and said, no, you can't go and get him, and he wouldn't go get him. He would just turn around and turn his helicopters around. You can't tell that man when he tells you no, especially in Central and South America, forget it. That Pope calls all shots when it comes to this place. He runs 2.2 billion motherfucking people on this earth are obligated to whatever this man wants, they do. He just has to speak words and they are going to jump. And do you think that the president of this nation, no matter how much military power we have, are going to do something, and that Pope is going to come out to the world and tell the whole world whatever the hell happened, he was not at all, this was against his will, and he's going to make a big production about it? Are you kidding me? This is going to cause a massive turmoil and political crises all over the goddamn Central and South America. Are going to go bananas if something like that were to happen. And George Bush 1 is not willing to have this kind of situation happen just because of this. He's just going to wait and see what that Pope tells him. And he told him, go get him. And he did. But anyway, we're off the topic again. There's so many things to talk about. Well, where were we at? Yes, they left during World War I, and their empire ended as a result. So in this case, it was not particularly an economic situation that causes the end of their empire. It is World War I, and they need to come back to protect little England, and they just never went back to occupy all these places. Like, literally, they just set up junta governments and they still control it like puppets. So their empire has not really ever ended officially. However, because the United States was manipulated into World War One, even though all the wars that the United States has been participating in since the very beginning of after our revolution have been by special decree, because the only way our Constitution permits this country to go into a conflict or a war, no matter what it is, wherever the war is happening, it must be 2/3 of Congress plus the president that vote to make this occur. That never ever happened. It never will, because this is just not possible to get that kind of a acceptance on a 2/3 majority plus the president in any conflict. There is only one other option that can make it happen, and that is special circumstances. Special circumstances mean that another power, anybody at all, that takes any kind of anything that they do against our interests or our, things, whatever it be, no matter what, just one incident, like in Vietnam, for example, it was the Tonkin incident. Okay, we did it ourselves, but we blamed the Vietnamese for blowing the ship up in the Tonkin Gulf. This was the reason that we declared war on Vietnam, because President Johnson then had the opportunity to, declare war himself, personally, the president alone, because we blamed the Vietnamese for blowing up the ship in the Tonkin Bay. And of course, Secretary of State Marshall, no, that's before, that's World War II, General Marshall, the Marshall Plan and all that. Can't remember his name. Wow. He was Secretary of State during the Johnson administration and the Kennedy administration before he died, and Johnson too. He came out on TV in the 70s and told us that that was all made up bullshit. We also know that Pearl Harbor was well known in advance by Roosevelt. We knew it before it happened. In fact, Roosevelt had already moved the real important ships out of Hawaii into San Diego and just left the junk ships in Hawaii to get blasted away, just to get us into the conflict. We had no way of getting into the conflict to help England or France on the little island of England to fight the Nazis or the Japs, until the Japs had, tried to come and destroy our fleet at Hawaii. Once they did, he declares war by himself with his own authority, because of the incident at Pearl Harbor that he allowed to occur. Even we knew all about it before the event took place, but he wanted it to happen because he needed to get an excuse to get into the conflict, mostly because of the European problem, not the Japs. But in this case, it had to be for both. But it allowed us to do both because we had the understanding, or they did at the time, that the Japanese, the Italians, and the Germans had a Axis pact of military idea, and that they were allied to each other. So if we fighting the Empire of Japan, we are necessarily also at war with Germany. So it really had much less to do with the fact that we're there to save little England once again, the same old way we did with World War I. In this case, it was the sinking of the Lusitania by the Germans. But the Germans, and before this event took place, had taken out ads in the New York Times and warned people that any shipping going in or out of England is up for attack. And we were forewarned of this. And the Lusitania was filled with transporting, like the Germans had noted, they sunk it because it was filled with arms. It is a passenger ship, but it was full of weapons in the bow of the ship. We claimed, of course, that was nonsense, and that they attacked a commercial shipping liner and sunk it. And the Germans, of course, responded that no, it was full of arms, And that's why we sunk it. But it didn't matter, because the fact is that it was sunk. Wilson then had the okay to, you know, enter the war on by reason of that fact alone. In the meantime, prior to this event occurring, the bankers who are so obsessed with getting the central bank called the Federal Reserve, you know, in place, had already begun working out the details to, you know, get us into the conflict. And because Wilson wouldn't do it under any circumstances, mostly because of the cost. So the bankers had the intention of originally getting together to do the central bank idea. They always had wanted to do it, and it had been done in the past during Washington administration, then ripped out during Jefferson's term. Jackson administration, they tried it again. He pulled it down. It happened a couple other times, and we always got rid of it. Well, in this case, and during World War I in 1914, they raced to Jekyll Island to put it together, because Wilson's objection to getting involved in the war is mostly because we can't afford it. So they run back to Wilson at Christmas break when Congress is back home for the holidays, and there's only a few people in, you know, session that are still in session, because session hasn't ended yet. It's just that most of them are gone. So only a few members are still there in the Senate or the House, but Wilson, the president himself, is getting notified by these bankers that, look what we've done. We've made the quote-unquote central bank, the Federal Reserve is what it's called. Now you can get involved with the conflict, because this institution gives you unlimited access to all the equity you need, and you don't even have to pay it back. It's by interest alone. Sign it, decree it with your own authority, make it into law. It also comes along with the income tax, which the Constitution says that you don't have to pay it. Taxes on your income. It's not obligation that you have to. It's only if you want to. But they circumvented it through the law of the Federal Reserve Act, made it mandatory, and instituted an IRS, Internal Revenue System Service, to collect income taxes from the people. Not one dime of the hundreds of billions of dollars collected every year in income taxes from the entire nation go to running this country. All departments, all agencies, the entire government can be funded efficiently enough in every way with all kinds of other taxes that we have up the asshole in this country. Funds everything. $3.6 trillion a year in budget already covered and paid for. All the billions collected in income taxes straight into the pockets of the bankers themselves. Yes, just for them. Always has been, always was, always will be. And you want to tell me something about this bank that you think is so important? Oh, well, it definitely is to them, because that's why they're all super wealthy and rich and you have nothing. Because Jefferson told us in no uncertain terms that if ever this kind of system was to be set up in this country, my God, it reads like a crystal ball. Just go to University of Virginia, type in Jefferson Banking. It'll shoot out 100 documents. Read that all, and this motherfucker knows. He predicted every single fucking thing that happened since 1914 when it started, until present day, until the very end, and in the right order too. He's not yet failed. Every single fucking word. Unbelievable. Like he's looking into a crystal fucking ball. How in the hell does he know how to predict this shit? And in the right order, no less. And the final outcome to this institution is slavery in your own nation. And yes, we are already slaves without chains. The worst slaves are those who do not see the bars on their doors or around them, or chains on their arms. Those are the worst kinds of slaves. You're a slave, but you don't even yet know it. It's coming, don't worry. You'll have time enough to be freaked out, because this country is going to go bananas in a couple years. I'm attempting to show you the pattern. I said Spain first, look at Holland next, France goes on the same old way, England did the same thing, each of which are 100-year periods, all of which had economic crises, leap to war to fix it. They always lose, and the exception is England. They were not having an economic crisis. It was just that World War I needed to, they were in the conflict because of that. World War I was occurring, so the United States had to get involved, and this Federal Reserve was going to fund the process. So Wilson was, getting on board with that once he knew that he could afford to, go into the war. But still he objected because there was no special circumstance, such as the reason the Lusitania was sunk. Now Wilson is going to declare war, and we are going to go to the conflict, and we flipped the script, because before we got into the conflict in World War I, while England and France are huddled up on the island, the Germans are announcing surrender terms to the English and the British and the French, telling them, you have 3 weeks. They already had locked up the continent in World War I. Everything done. The Germans had it all. Just the same old way Hitler did it in World War II. Fast, just the whole continent locked, except for England. They're huddled up on the island. They're announcing surrender terms in 3 weeks, or else we're coming there and we're going to occupy your island. They had won the war already. So the only way that this thing got flipped is because the U.S. comes in and saves the situation by entering in on behalf of the British and the French. We flip the script. And as a result, we rise to empire status from 1914 till present day. That is exactly 102 years. And what are we working on? Patterns from Spain to Holland to France to England to the United States, all of which are 100-year periods, give or take, each and every single one. All of which are, with the exception of England, an economic crisis, race to war, they always lose, and then we go forward for the next, the next, the next. I'm trying to demonstrate to you in no uncertain terms that we are entering already into the deprivation of the American empire and its collapse. Look at your leaders and ask yourself, why are they pushing war? Every single day, it's nothing but war, 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 war. Russia, North Korea, Syria, anything at all. Anything. War, 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 war. It's the easiest and best option that we know of to fix the economic situation that is going to explode if it isn't solved quickly. This economic situation is in such disastrous circumstances at this present moment that we don't know any other way we could possibly fix it. Economically speaking, not even the Fed cannot move the fucking rate from 25 basis points, or it's possible that the goddamn economy will collapse like a house of cards. This is impossible. They fucking put themselves into a position in 2007, once they did the bailouts, that was bad enough. But Bernanke took the unbelievable move by moving the rate from 5% to 0. Just like that after they did all the bailouts. Is he nuts? He has to be either crazy or this is intentional. Because this is the absolute worst possibility ever. The reason, of course, behind that is QE. It's quantitative, print. We're so big, our GDP, we can get away with it for a long time. But we've been doing it for 8 fucking years, and those dollars are out there, and they're going to come back. At 0% interest, forget it. It's a brick in the face, and we're going to fall down, and we can't get back up. We have to move the rate up. It's got to go up to minimum 4%. Rate hikes always include pain, no matter what it is. 1%, it don't matter. If you do a hike on that prime rate at 1%, we're at 0. 1% alone is going to overheat the economy no matter what. It always does. That's just part of what rate hikes do. This economy is not capable of withstanding even 1% at this point, or else it's in danger of collapsing utterly. The only thing that is functioning in this economy that makes it all covered and just barely you can understand that anything at all is occurring is manipulated so cleverly right before your face. You feel nothing, as though there's something very wrong, because they're clicking the numbers, desperate to try and keep your attention away from the reality of what is truly going on. Because again, the whole point here is initiate war. If we win, great for us, and we probably will with the United States. We're still the muscle of the world, even though we're broke and our country's collapsing economically. It doesn't matter. We still have the power and the muscle, so we'll probably win, and things will be great. We can fix everything. If we lose, it's still okay. The people of the country will be fucked, but the leadership that's in power, they'll be fine. Even though we'll lose the conflict, if likely we will, because in all the different cases that we've mentioned so far, Spain, Holland, France, England, they lost in every one of these cases, and another one came up. There's no reason in the world to believe that the United States of America has some special privilege to be the most powerful, important, and prosperous nation on earth. Because why? We're the biggest sons of bitches in the world who like to take over countries, overthrow governments, kill people, bomb indiscriminately, wage our belief systems over everybody on the whole planet and telling them that it's for democracy and freedom. Lying sons of bitches that we are, racing to all these countries whenever there's a natural disaster and telling them that, oh, we're going to help you, with smiles on our faces, when we do nothing but take their shit and fuck them completely on every country on the goddamn planet, and been doing it forever. For the last 40 fucking years, nothing but. The first country ever to understand and realize that you do not ever take help from the USA when there's a natural disaster was when Indonesia had their big earthquake. And who shows up? The USA. Carrier fleets, wanting smiles on our faces. We're going to help you. He said, no, not you. Go away. We don't want your help. Just get the fuck off. Ha! The first time ever, we were shocked. They got a clue. And now the whole world realizes that the Americans are nothing but evil thoughts, interested in our own shit to take and steal everything from everyone else. Like mother, like daughter. England was our mother, and we are just the same old way. Wicked as hell. We weren't always. We were a good, great nation, and that's how we became the empire of the world. But then we melted. About 40 years ago it started, and it's just gotten steadily worse all along. And now we promulgate nothing but filth and shit and trash to the world, and we are the purveyors of Mystery Babylon. That is what the United States is known as. Also, it is known in the Bible as the hammer of the world and Mystery Babylon. And you look at that Statue of Liberty. She stands in there. Looks like she's pregnant, huh? She's holding a flame. Is that a torch or a cup? Maybe it's a cup overflowing. The golden cup in her hand. She got how many spikes coming out of her head? I think it's 7, yes? 7 crown stars. Who is she? Look at her face. Got like a pregnant thing going on, holding a big cup right there in New York Harbor. Samaramis, maybe? Isis? Remind you of anything? Maybe that? Filthy whore holding her offering cup to the world in New York City, the market capital of the whole planet. Every market exchange on earth is located there, bigger than any other one on earth. The Hang Seng is the next biggest, then the Nikkei, then the DAC, then the CAC. The mercantile exchange is still very, very big, but there's much more than the mercantile exchange in the city of London. It is still, to this day, the banking center of the entire world. The little teeny part of London itself is called the City of London, and it has a dick obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle, just like the Washington Monument is in the D.C. District of Columbia. It is not a part of the United States of America. It is an entity in and of itself. And the Vatican has one also, a dick, right in the center of St. Peter's Square, indicating it too is entirely separate from everything else. It is in of itself its own power base for temporal and spiritual power of all. London is financial center of all, with the big dick Cleopatra's Needle there to show you, and right there in the little neighborhood called City of London. All the skyscrapers are located there. The Mercantile Exchange, it's money, 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 money. And then the big Washington Monument, which is not from Egypt. We made that man-made, but it's 666 feet tall, with a reflecting pool in the middle because the sacred geometry resonates off of that, and it ensures that pentagon. What architect would make a building in the shape of a goddamn pentagon? If it was going up and down, it'd be the largest structure, man-made structure on Earth, but it goes out, so you don't know that. But there's a hole in the middle of the pentagon, and if you flip the white light into blue, it looks like this swirling up like a tornado. That's what you would see. It's the energy resonating inside of that building. 20,000 people, and all they're doing is military, everything military, military. All the energy that's being resonated through that building is swirling out of that. It's being activated to ensure that the United States, under any circumstances, no matter how, no matter what is going on, no matter we're broke or otherwise, we will still wield the military force and the hammer of the world. It won't be, we will still have it. And we still do, and we still will, even as bad as the circumstances are going to get when this economy blows. We're going to suffer, as the people of this nation will find out in very short order, because this is a foregone conclusion. And even if we do get involved in this war that's already begun and it heats up, we are going to lose the conflict. Just know that. This is a prediction of something that I can already say that I'm seeing every single time I'm checking it. It's revealing the same thing. And it's going to occur between 2 years, 3 months, and 3 years from now. And that's as much as I can get. I'm only able to see this city of Los Angeles and everything that's going on. People going crazy, knocking stores, violence everywhere. I don't know. That's all I can see. But I've had dreams about the same thing that seem to regard the entire country as going through this at the same time period. I've had other dreams in the past, one of which was 2 years ago, and in the dream I was witnessing hundreds and thousands of these Middle Eastern migrant peoples, and I noticed in the dream, I knew what city it was because I've been there. It's Munich, Germany is where it was. And they're throwing bricks and stones and rocks, and they're shouting and screaming and everything. And literally, in the dream, as I'm having the dream, one of these huge rocks hits me physically in my leg. It hurt so much. It woke me out of the bed and out of sleep. I came out of the dream and I woke up. I felt the fucking brick hit me in my leg. It hurt. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? A year later, I'm watching it on TV. It literally occurred a year later. Just like the dream showed me. It happened. I'm watching in the news and this is what it's showing. I'm like, this is impossible. I can't believe it. Look, every human being has the ability to see the future. In another video, I'm going to tell you all about how to do it. There's a method to do this. But look, you need to know something before you get interested in knowing how to do this. It isn't hard to activate that process, but knowing what it is, how far away it is, and can you do anything about it, these are all questions. And they're very important because you may not have the answer to any of that. And the other thing is that if you learn of the event today, let's assume you can figure out like an estimation of how far away it is. Let's say you made the determination it's 5 years from now, and you even think you know maybe what it is that you're witnessing. Okay. What's going to happen between today and 5 years when that event supposedly is going to occur? 100,000 things that's going to change it into maybe something else. Yes. Because that's exactly what the two sides are doing. That's all that they're doing. They've been doing that forever. Both of them are outside of time and space. Each of them are witnessing events of the future, hundreds of years into the future, in most cases, both of which. One of them wants it, and the other one doesn't. So they're both activating their power, and they have big power, both sides, to change that event into, one wants it, so he's going to use all his power to keep it. The other one doesn't want it, so he's going to use his power to change it into something else, and so it may change. That's all. And that's what their conflict is. So as human beings, even though we can do these things, we have no power on our own to influence the outcome, whether it will be or won't be. The only thing we could do is to keep checking to see if it still reveals over and over and over again, and then up until the time that it actually does happen. If it changes along the way, well, there's nothing that we can do that could change it back, because we don't have power to make that change. They do, but we don't. Okay, but what I'm telling you about the economy and how the country is going to literally go bananas and explode, and there's going to be, I'm talking about guns in the streets, martial law, things like this. It's really, really going to be bad. And I have to be through it too, and I'm scared to death. I just know that while we have it, the time to enjoy whatever we got, just do that, because there's no real, in my opinion, I don't see any way that this can be avoided. It's just a foregone conclusion of what is. And it's sad, but again, I repeat, that's the whole point of this video. I mean, I have other videos I want to make to, tell you about other things. Not because I know everything, but because I understand a lot more, I think, probably than maybe most other people do, for a lot of different reasons. And it isn't because I want to be arrogant. It's because you should know the truth, as much truth that you can know, and never ever accept a lie for any reason from anybody. I don't, and I won't accept a lie from anybody else, and I would never lie to myself. I give myself permission to lie to other people, yeah, always have, but I don't try to do that anymore. I've reformed. But sometimes I am deceptive, can be, yeah. I definitely agree. I'm not going to lie about that. I am. But, I have the very real intention to talk about and show the people of the world, whoever wants or is interested in knowing, for example, the Holy Bible, right? This is a whole video, and only a small portion of it that I could do in one video, to fill in all these spaces that this Holy Bible's got problems. Yes, we all agree. It's hard. It's got the holes everywhere. The dates are all wrong. You got propaganda, white propaganda in there, literary devices of this kind and that, parables. Oh gosh, there's problems overkill. Everywhere you look, this book is just horrifyingly messed up. There's reasons for it, though. And we can put the puzzle together. I can help you do that. In another video, I will attempt to show you how it is operating and how we can fix these things, so that then you can have a much clearer impression of what it is that it's saying and why it talks the way it does and what it means. It doesn't mean that you have to believe in it. It's just that you should have more of the picture so you can make a choice, whether you want to or you don't. It's up to you to believe in whatever you want. Nobody can make that choice for you. Only you can. And if you only have half of the information in your possession, then how can you make a choice one way or the other? You can. And I don't claim that I can give all of that to you, to anyone. I can only offer you what I have, and I can offer you a lot more than you have already. If all of you know is that holy book, the Holy Bible itself, then you don't have enough, because there's too many problems. Wouldn't you rather have at least as many of those problems that you could possibly fix and fill in the blank spaces so that it makes much more sense in a grand sense, wouldn't you like to have that opportunity to then fully have as much opportunity to know any and all the truth that you could know? Because nobody can know everything, but you can know a whole bunch more. And truth is always hard. First of all, know that. And so if this book is all true, and I agree it is, and I can prove it, at least I can try, it's not at all going to be a fun exercise in any case, because truth hurts. And this book is all true. That's why it's so horrifyingly impossible to read or to believe. Because it's not that you're evil or awful or wicked or bad. It's just anthropomorphic. Human beings don't want to accept these things because they're hard. Truth is hard. Period. Not a platitude. Just is what it is. And if the whole book is true, then my God, it's going to be awful. Yeah, that's only a natural, normal response. It's not easy. But it is what it is. And either you will believe it or you won't. But either way, you can believe what you want. But I don't believe in fairy tales or holy books, even that. It's just a holy book, so what do? Get them all, read them, Bhagavad Gita, Torah, Quran, Holy Bible, Talmud. I mean, the list goes on and on. Flush all the religions into the toilet. Get rid of them. They're nonsense. Social constructs, they're meaningless. So over that. Every one of them in the world, corrupt and shit, just filth. What do you have left? Holy books. Read them. See what they say. Can they provide any evidence? What do they say? We'll talk about it in another video. We'll get into all of that. And we'll understand which ones say this, say that, and what can they back up, this, that, the other, or what. And I'll tell you as much as I can and what do I know about this, that, and the other. So far today, we're going to end this. We've demonstrated, I think, quite well how the empires of Spain, Holland, France, England, now the United States, all in unbelievably, coincidentally, 100-year periods, give or take here and there, with the exception of France, that did not have an economic meltdown, but had a revolution that geopolitically shifted the entire planet over the course of less than 100 goddamn years. It's the biggest event, bigger than World War I and World War II, in the modern history, and we are at the precipice of the next one. We are just about there, at the end of the new epoch. I told you the French Revolution was the end of an epoch, and the end of an age. The epoch was the Dark Ages, over. So the new epoch began in 1787 and is to present day, now 2017. It's only going to be a few more years before the end of this age of America and Empire of America will be done, and the epoch, that we do not have a name for it as of yet, but we'll have one as soon as it occurs, it will end at the same time. We do not yet know what the catalyzing moment will be. It can be any number of things. One thing is to be sure, we are at the verge of it occurring at any time within the next 3 years maximum. That much I can be sure of. Then we will move forward from there. It will not be the end of the world, but many people will have, big problems. Many people will die. Just the same old way in the French Revolution, only in this case it's going to be global in scope, and it involves the entire planet all at one time, and this is new for history. None of the things that are happening on the planet right now, going bananas crazy, are new to history. This is all very real and stuff that's happened many times over, all over the history of this world forever. The only difference that today and any other time period throughout all of the course of history is that it never ever occurred in a way where the entire planet was all happening at one moment in time in such a way that it is today. In the past, it has always been regional this, regional that, areas here, areas there. Still all the same different things, different events, this, that, the other. Nothing new under the sun. All things that have been done will be done before. It will be done again. So that's all new, easy stuff that we all know about, or those of us that know, we know. Okay, so that's nothing new, all the different things. It's just that we've never, ever in history had these things all happening at the very same time, the whole planet over. And this particular event that is going to metastasize and catalyze in the next 3 years maximum is going to be the next biggest event after the French Revolution, but it will be even bigger because of the fact that it involves the whole planet at one time. So yes, lots of people will die, but the world will not end, and we'll move forward from there. And I can only say that there's other things, that will be necessarily occurring beyond that. As far as I'm able to determine, cannot claim that I know the end of the world. I would be lying if I said so. I can be sure that I can know up to 10 years' time. At the very least, I can be certain of that. I don't know if that means that I'll be dead in 10 years because I cannot get further than that, or if that means that it's over in 10 years. It could be any and all things. I have no idea. Maybe in the next 5 years I can get further away. I just don't know. And by the way, what I'm able to get to and what I can estimate is at least the 10 years time, it does not at all look to me like there's something of the end of the world that's happening. I don't talk about these things in any kind of respect to put any kind of energy into it, because speaking words this is another thing I'll have to get into with the next video. Words are important because you hear it all the time. The word this, the word that, the word. What's the word? Word. Is it the Bible? No. Is it the nickname for Jesus? Yes, but that's not the reason why it says word. Everything word. Why is it so important? In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was God. God was the Word. And He said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Bam. Duh. So what is it? It is the method by which this Creator God, the Creator Jewish God, Him, He creates by this means. He speaks words and then it happens. Just like that. Okay. So if this is His method of creation by doing that, then angels and people also can do the same things. And that's why I never shut up. I'm talking all the time. But you just think it's words, this, information, that. No, there's something underneath. And we can't make the universe come into being just by speaking, but we can do many things. I know I do all the time. I have done. I'm a master at doing it. I never ever shut up. I'm talking every single minute that I ever can because I'm always doing things and calling it into reality for myself and for whatever situation that I need to, fix or help. That's all that I do. That's all I've ever done my whole life. And I have to say that up until 15 years ago, I had a charmed life, and I've lived all over the place and had all kinds of whatever experiences, fun and stuff like that, but sex, this, whatever, but the last 15 years has been pretty much a trial by fire. But I've grown leaps and bounds from what I was into what I am today. I am definitely not pious or God or any kind of holy anything, holy shit, pretty much. However, I am a different individual than ever I could say for myself in the past, and I'm a much better person for it. And I have the very strong desire and intention to offer to the world whatever it is that I can offer, which is only knowledge and information that I possess, that you may or may not, that can, if you want it, and it's something that you find could be helpful to you, I have no reason in the world to want to keep people down. I have every reason and intention to give you more of the things that you may not know about and tell you all about who's been keeping you down and the reasons behind it and how you can go and locate them all, and how I am part of the puzzle, and who exactly am I, and why am I so important to this thing and the rest of them. Those of you who know who I'm talking about and know what I'm talking about, you wouldn't have any questions about what I'm saying. Anybody else that's watching this that does not know what and who I'm speaking about and why I'm not saying the names or giving you clear understanding of what it is, It's because I'm not ready to do it. And I think maybe you should just use your brain and think a little bit about it, and we'll talk about it in another video. But today's video, I'm going to end it. It's an hour and 58 minutes. Already it's too long. But I hope that you can take away from this what I can only say is a lesson in the fact that the American empire is on the brink of ending. It's not going to be the end of the world, but we are going to have to suffer a lot of pain. We have a few years left before this is going to really occur in a big way, as far as I can see. Of course, anything can be changed, so maybe we should all pray and or say happy thoughts and good things and try to change whatever it is that's coming. I don't want to speak about it in any kind of detail because that could make it come faster. It's just the way it is. That's all I can say. Again, the word thing. This is about, words are powerful. They have impact. You need to know that. Every word that you speak, it has directions, it has impact, and it will do. Okay, I have to end it. Thank you very much for your time. Look for the next video whenever you can. Good night.